My name's Tara Flood. I'm the director at the Alliance for Inclusive Education. And since I came into post, about a year ago now, I've been very conscious that the Alliance has been around for some time. It's been around for about 16 years. And I really feel that I've taken on a very huge legacy from the previous director and the founder, Micheline. And I thought it would be a really good opportunity for Micheline and I to get together to talk about how the Alliance really started, what some of her influences have been, and maybe where the Alliance might be going in the future.
We had this conference called Inclusion Now, I think. And it was a fantastic conference, and it was only when we did it, I think, that we realised how unique an experience it was to bring disabled adults together with parents and young disabled people. There was a new law, Warnock's first report had come out, and for the first time there was support in mainstream schools for disabled children. And they wanted it, and they formed an organisation to support each other to make that happen.
So who were the people around the kitchen table?
Well, it was that group. It was those few people that had started that organisation, and so on. Mostly my friends from the disability movement. And then there was Richard Reeser, who I'd met because we'd been put together to write the book Disability Equality in the Classroom, which again was an ILIA project. And Richard was very keen to think about teachers and to bring that whole thing into schools. We couldn't let go what happened at that conference. That was the main thing. It just been so amazing. We couldn't let it go. We just felt, well, this has got to continue. We've got to keep together these connections that people had made because it was so powerful.
Were many of the people that were kind of around that table and that you made contact with after that, did they then go on to become council members for the Alliance? Because I'm aware that that many of the council members that are still with me have been around almost since day one.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that's right. You forge very deep links when you fight these fights together, really. And as well as that, we share a common dream. And we want it now more than the desire to have it is as strong now as it's ever been. And you kind of need that. You need to be with people.
Micheline, I'm very conscious that the inclusion movement feels like that has some very clear shared principles. And I wonder whether or not you could give any ideas of what the disability rights movement might learn from the inclusion movement, because the disability rights movement at the moment feels very fractured.
I think the problem when you have any oppressed group is the internalised oppression. It's the way that we disrespect each other, get competitive with each other, and we don't always understand each other's issues very well, or have the resources to deal with them, which probably is an even bigger issue. And I think the disability movement has always suffered from not having the financial resources or the energy to do the things we would love to do to support each other. And then people got very hurt and disillusioned by it. But I also think where the Alliance has been different, because we also haven't had I can't say that we've had any more resources really either, is that we knew we needed allies right from the beginning, and it's not any one single. The issue is not about any one particular group of people. It's a dream about humanity, which everybody who's part of it can believe in for themselves. And I think that's been the big thing, also because it's about inclusion. And it's attracted people who are willing to look at and work on and try and overcome the things that would divide us and make us want to throw people out. So I suppose people are prepared to look beyond the immediate feelings, and work together.
I think you're right. I think the shared experience of oppression comes from lots of different people rather than just people who have a very similar oppression. And so you don't get it feels to me, you don't get quite as bogged down in that as you do kind of like, having to experience disableism on a daily basis. So where does your belief that all children, whatever their impairment or difference, should be included, where has that come from?
It comes from, I would say in the first instance, being a disabled child myself, feeling what it feels like to be excluded from the world of children's society, which is based around school in our countries. And knowing that nothing could ever make up for that, that even though later on in my life when I left school I went to ordinary college and sort of re-entered the world as it was, nothing could ever heal the hurts that had been created in that first separation. And it wasn't just for me, it was, I suppose, the realisation when I left my special school that it wasn't just me that wasn't prepared to live in the world wasn't prepared for me at all, and that how could we learn to live together as adults if we've been separated as children? It just, to me, makes absolutely no sense. And it doesn't really matter which group of children it is. If you separate black and white children from each other, it's going to happen. Yeah. Or girls from boys. And I can't stand the fact that school seems to be school from an adult's point of view is about learning particular useful skills to make you a productive member of a particular economic system. Where school for children is a place where you go to learn about how to live in the world outside of your family. And it's about relationships and who we are and what is the point of life and all those big questions. And those big questions you need to learn together. You need to get a complete picture of what the world is like. And you can only do that by making relationships with other people.
What do you think have been some of the key achievements for the Alliance over the last 15 or 16 years?
Well, the first and foremost thing is the Alliance is the coming together of disabled people and allies to work together for a common dream. And I don't think I've ever experienced that in any other situation at all. So for just getting that, overcoming whatever barriers there have been in the past to that happening, that was a fantastic achievement in the first place. And the relationships, I have to say, the Alliance is full of very close relationships between people. People have allowed people into their lives, and that's been a sort of fantastic thing. I'd say another thing is that it was a campaigning organisation, and it always had it was always based on what we would call the social model of disability or anything, behaviour, whatever you want to call it. That it's always seen that society itself is causing these problems, which we then have to live with, and that the issue is to change the structures and change the laws and the climate and the understandings and the values and everything, It was action orientated. We came together to do things together. And that kept people from sinking, I think, beneath the weight. When you act, when you do things, however enormous the problem seems, and even if you're doing a small thing, it still feels it makes you feel powerful.
And with other people who share the kind of same kind of principles.
Absolutely.
I think.
It's got nothing like it, really.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And we did do some crazy things together. You know, we've had some particularly when, you know, campaigns around some of the young children who were being excluded from school, and we went and, you know...
Why don't you tell us about one of them? I know there have been many.
There have been many. I mean, I can think of... I think Camden Town Hall was a good one. And I think Prevey had come, and her daughter had a statement, and a statement is this legal document that where the local authority at that time said which school the child should go to, and they'd put a special school on it, and Prevey wasn't having it. And she came and brought this statement and set fire to it on the steps at the town hall. And, you know, we were there with our music and the children, and
great.
People were completely bemused by what we were doing. That was, you know...
How long ago was that?
Those were in the early days, and that was when the law still could place children completely against parents' wishes in a segregated school. And of course, one of the achievements, probably one of the biggest practical achievements, has been that we as a result of all these individual actions and it coming in the newspapers and people having never realised that that was what was happening, that it was happening against people's parents' wishes, and that's the way the law worked. People were actually quite shocked by that. And it took all these actions to bring that out into the open, really. And it did end up with the law changing. So that in fact if the parents, they won't now send a child to a special school if the parents don't agree with it.
No, that's right.
So, you know, and that is really quite a huge step forward. So...
What about, I think really the Alliance is probably one of the few organisations led by disabled people that recognises that disabled young people should be leading campaigns around inclusion. Why do you think it's the Alliance that has taken that on and promoted it so strongly? I mean, there's a real history for that.
Yeah. Well, it stems from the type of... it stems from the fact that the parents who first formed Parents in Partnership, which then changed its name to Parents for Inclusion, were already allies. They'd already taken this viewpoint or this position around their job in terms of their role as a parent, to be an ally to a child who they felt belonged to an oppressed minority within society. You know, that is a stance, it's a position, which is different to feeling, which of course many parents do, that they love their children, but they've kind of got to make their child fit in, and that's their job. Their job is to, you know, do that. So those parents were already preset in a way to want to empower their young people. And in fact, I don't think, we did form this group called Young and Powerful. And it was almost, you know, it had to have all these factors, otherwise it would never have worked. It had to have enough parents who were willing to support it, and that meant physically drive their children there, buy the food, clear up the mess after them, you know, all those things, and be willing to stand back and let it happen. Very, very difficult for parents to do that. And the fact we had the resources, the room, the space. I think also, you know, I have to say this, blowing my own trumpet, but I think Lucy's role in it was because you can't force children to lead things.
I've no doubt everyone knows that Lucy is your daughter.
Yeah, Lucy's my daughter. She was extremely self-confident, and although I have to say, when Young and Powerful started, my idea was a much lower key idea, which was that I was concerned that there were a lot of one-off disabled children in very large mainstream schools who had no disabled friends, or peer group, really. And I've known that as very important to me. And it's this thing that is quite difficult talking about inclusion. People get a bit confused because they think it means that disabled kids don't need each other. You know, they only need able-bodied friends, and that's all that matters. But I've always known that's not true. So originally, I just wanted a group where all these one-off kids could come together and talk about how fucking hard it is, actually. Because I knew it was for a lot of them. And so, and I just said, I asked Lucy if she'd like to be the leader of that group, you know. And she was only 12. And she invited some of her friends from school, so there were always able-bodied children there. I think it became huge because the adults needed them desperately. So I think in some ways we put a lot on them. We put a lot of expectations on them to perform in public, you know, and all these sorts of things. Which, what can you say looking back? Some of it was good, some of it wasn't good. But, you know, in the time it existed, they were like a sort of shining star, you know, they did things that...
Kind of pioneers, I think, really.
Who have been the biggest influences in your life, both as a disabled person and also a parent?
Why I came to run the Alliance in the way I've run it, lots of people have influenced me. When I was in my 20s, I joined a thing called the Alternative Society that was, at its time, very radical. And it brought together all kinds of people who were looking at different ways of doing things. The radical midwives came out of it, education otherwise came out of it, alternative technology, and in every area of life people were coming together to try and think about something that was based more on humanity than what was going on, really. And the man that led that had a great affection for me, a great confidence in me. So he was a big influence, taught me that I could think, I suppose. And there've been other people like that, you know, along the line, and I've sort of accumulated a picture of...
A picture of influence.
Of influence, yeah. And also what the problem is, you know, I think I've got a bigger... I haven't come just from this one single position of me as a disabled person wanting equality with a world which I can actually see is in a mess. I'm not really coming from that place. I'm really coming from a place where I think we're all suffering from a lot of misguided policies and values and, you know, stuff.
Is it too big a question to ask you what you think the solution to that might be, Micheline?
How do we say it? Of course not. Well, I suppose if I think about what I think inclusion is really about, it is a complete radical alternative value system to the one that we currently live under, which is dominated by capitalism and the values of capitalism, which is about selfishness, greed, competitiveness, you know, and the accumulation of wealth, which is the entire point of capitalism. And if you narrow, as is seems to me is happening, you narrow down what matters to this tiny little picture of, you know, success. You're never going to have an inclusive, you couldn't possibly have an inclusive society. You haven't, you just got to look at it. You can see we haven't got it. So in the big picture you can't have it, and in the small picture you can't have it either. So if the small picture is a parent wanting a child with Down syndrome to go to their local school and be valued, even though they may never learn to read and write and get a job as such, then you can't have that either without a complete radical shift of values, you know, and what the purpose is of school and so on. So I suppose what I think the answer is inclusion. And what I mean by that is people reconnecting with each other at a human level, so that we can have the goal of helping each other become whoever we are preordained to become, you know, to become our full selves, rather than become just a little puppet in some great economic machine, you know, of which many of us can never be. Really. And I think the thing about disabled people, why it's very important that we are leading this. We've become leaders of it. It isn't that, how can I explain it? It isn't that somebody said those people must become leaders and gone out and got us and put us in the front of their queue. It just is inevitably through our experience of life. If you, by definition, cannot become this thing that the capitalist society wants you to become, and yet you still believe you have a value and a right to life and so on, you can't help but become, and are prepared to go after it. You just you become a leader. In as much as you're living out, you're modelling a different value system. So, and the thing why it's particularly important around education for in our developed rich societies where everybody has to go to school is that we are excluded from it. That's the whole point. Because the mythology anyway says that we will never become productive, and the entire system is about creating productive units, you know, units of productivity, and we look like we'll never become that. So in that value system we are worthless and need to be somewhere else, get in the way. We're at the sharp end of it, as are other children whose behaviour makes it very difficult for them to fit into this particular mould, who have needs that are different, you know. Children are not loved enough, usually, you know, and we have to be their leaders as well. We have to include them. We have to be the ones that bring everybody into the picture.
What advice would you give me as the still relatively new director at the Alliance for Inclusive Education?
Well, I think one of the things that I learnt really from my time at the Alliance, because we've struggled for money, as you know. It's been on the edges of the organisational structure has been near the edge of collapse so many, quite a few times. And when I asked people, all our members, what was really important to them about the Alliance, they almost unanimously said the same thing, really, was that it was the hub of the wheel, which, even if they never met us and they never actually got there to any meeting, the fact that they knew we were there enabled them to do whatever they needed to do on the edge of the wheel, on the rim of the wheel, if you like. It was knowing that there was a hub holding it all together. And so it's... And one of the main ways we let people know that is through the magazine that we do, and meetings and email and all those things. So the kind of remembering how absolutely vital it is. Not that you do all the work yourself, but that you're there to encourage and support and give hope to all those other people out there, really. Again, I think one of the things that I think is not understood by many other movements, really, is that your allies need you. They need your encouragement and your support and your friendship and all those things. it's the relationships. It may sound very twee and girly and all that sort of stuff. It is my style. But it works. I think relationships are everything. And as much as you can make an individual contact with everybody and they know you and you know them, you would never know. I think it's very difficult for us to know, as disabled people, how important our encouragement is to our allies. But I suppose what we're trying to create is an organisation which actually models the values that we're trying to put out in the world, that we try and learn. We try and use all the things that we've learned, like looking at people's gifts, remembering what we've got in common, not where we're different, taking the longer view when we seem to be being defeated, remembering that people are always a product of their past, however damaged they may be, that it's not their fault. All those things are all really, they're just really, really important to remember.
Why do you think the campaign or the struggle for inclusive education needs to be a collective struggle?
Well, I guess isolation's always the enemy. It's the enemy of any progressive movement, and it's certainly the enemy of inclusion. And that applies to head teachers as much as it applies to families or children or whatever. So I've always set out to link people together, to create networks and join them up, and publicise what they're doing, tell them they're doing great, sort of all that. So we have, obviously through all the families they've known schools, the work that Richard has done in many schools, training and all the training that's going on in schools, the people that just wanted to get a magazine, all those stories. I've gone after people because I've heard of a story or read something on the internet, and gone out and met them, pulled them in. That's a big part of what it is, is breaking the isolation, and then people are much more courageous about what they do.
Absolutely.